The media is gathered security around the courthouse is being ramped up, and the former president is due to be indicted on the most serious charges yet brought against him. One of his lawyers says the defense rejects the trial date envisioned by the prosecution.
To take President Trump to trial in 90 days, of course, is absurd. The question is, why do they want to do that? If you want to seek justice, then you need to offer President Trump an opportunity to get a hold of all the evidence.
The federal judge who was chosen at random to hear the case is Jamaican-born Tanya Chutkan. She was appointed by Obama in 2014. She's presided over dozens of prosecutions relating to the attack on the Capitol on January the 6th, 2021, which she has described in one judgment as a violent attempt to overthrow the government, and it nearly succeeded. The judge also presided over an action brought by Donald Trump in November 2021 to prevent the White House from handing over documents to a House Select Committee. She rejected the application, saying on that occasion, the president is not a king and the plaintiff is not the president. In the conspiracy charges, the prosecution outlines the extent to which Donald Trump attempted to persuade his then vice president to refuse to certify the vote. Just one of what the indictment says is a series of criminal acts. And in relation to Trump's actions leading up to and on January the 6th, Mike Pence issued his strongest criticism yet.
And then on that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution. But I chose the Constitution, and I always will. And I really do believe that anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be President of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put themselves over the Constitution should never be President of the United States again.
The former president's response was scathing. In a lengthy message on his social media, Donald Trump says of Pence, he didn't fight against election fraud, which we will now be easily able to prove based on the most recent fake indictment and information which will have to be made available to us finally. A really big deal. The VP had power that Mike didn't understand. More than 1,000 people have been convicted on charges related to actions stemming from this baseless claim of election fraud, some sentenced to prison terms of up to 18 years. The charges are similar to those brought against Donald Trump. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, Heidi Jo Castro is at the courthouse in Washington, D.C., where Trump is expected to appear.
The former president will be arrested and arraigned on Thursday. He's expected to come in person to the D.C. federal courthouse behind me, which is just a stone's throw away from the U.S. Capitol that was stormed by his supporters on January 6th. Trump will likely not be handcuffed or have to take a mugshot. He wasn't made to in either of the two previous indictments. Security here will be tight, though it's hard to predict how many protesters or supporters may turn up. A magistrate judge will make sure that Trump understands the charges he faces and then will likely allow him to enter a plea, and Trump says he will plead not guilty. Then this case will be handed to Judge Tanya Chutkan, who will set the trial date. No one knows if it's possible to complete a trial before the next presidential election in November of next year. And Trump has vowed to continue his candidacy for president no matter the outcome. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, Glenn Carl is a former national intelligence official. He joins us by Skype from Boston. Thank you very much for being on Al Jazeera. Now, it's less than 24 hours until Trump is due to be in that courthouse in Washington, D.C., not far from the Capitol. What sort of security concerns are there, and what do you think should be put in place to try and deal with potentially thousands of Trump supporters and protesters that are likely to head to the courthouse?
Well, the specific threats, if there be any, of course, you and I don't know them. But from what I have known for literally decades is that every year the national security establishment, the FBI, the CIA, and so on, have to, by law, assess and rank the threats to the United States. And the number one threat from back early-ish in my career, which goes back decades now, was and remains domestic white supremacist nationalists, militias. They are armed and they are hostile to the federal government. And as we have seen, they have been involved in various plots to overthrow it. A number of them now are in jail for their participation and involvement in the insurrection on January 6th, but the organizations remain. So that's the number one threat. And the way authorities have to try to stop it is you try to penetrate them. That was the job of my colleagues. And then the law enforcement authorities, the police and so on, will set up various perimeters in case of unrest. I suspect there might be less risk for now because numbers of them are in jail and are being prosecuted for their involvement on January 6th. And that might have a salutary effect on their willingness to take a risk again.
Just in the wake of January the 6th, we're just watching pictures here from that day. What lessons have been learned from what was a failure from a security perspective? What can be learned from that, and what do you think will be implemented here when Trump goes to court this time, but also in the months ahead?
Well, there have been fingers pointed, frankly, by the right, by the Republicans, on the incompetence of the response of the law enforcement and security authorities during the January 6th insurrection. That's really a misleading finger pointing and putting the blame where it shouldn't lie. Because it was 3 hours after the insurrection began before any orders were given for the law enforcement authorities at the city or the federal level to take any action. So since you had participants, frankly, which will be proven in the court of law, perhaps, inside the government in aiding and abetting the insurrection, the law enforcement didn't act. But if they are properly led and instructed to uphold their obligations and their oath, then they will act to keep a crowd from becoming unruly or from penetrating the courthouse.
You said before that white supremacy is the #1 national security threat. Can you just give us specifics about how security personnel will deal with them in particular?
Well, the aspect of the issue that I am most familiar with is obtaining information about their plans and intentions. Now, as a CIA officer, I had nothing to do by law with any domestic issue, except if there were a foreign aspect to it, and then I would work with my colleagues with the FBI. But the FBI has the lead on this, and their job is similar to what mine was overseas, and that is to penetrate any and learn its plans and intentions with respect to a hostile act or an illegal act against the United States. So that's the first step. What we all see are the uniformed personnel who will establish these perimeters and so on. They may receive information from the FBI that a certain individual is intending to do something, and then detention is possible if there is probable cause. But first, plans and intentions by the FBI, and then second, measures to counter any physical act.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time and your insight. That's Glenn Carl, former National Intelligence official. Thank you.